Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending our expert panel tonight as stage one of the PHN Innovation Challenge around mental health. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Kamilaroi people, in which we're meeting on their land today, recognise their contribution and acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and welcome any Aboriginal people here tonight. My name is Emma. I am the Regional Connector for the UNE Smart Region Incubator, and my colleague Jess, who is the Comms Manager. We're both from the UNE Smart Region Incubator, and we love to help people that come up with a business idea get their business off the ground. We'll be your hosts tonight, and we'll be interviewing the fabulous panel that we have here this evening to share their expertise with you all. So welcome to the Mental Health Innovation Challenge Expert Panel event, the first of a three-series event. The Hunter New England and Central Coast Primary Health Network has partnered with the University of Newcastle as well as the University of New England, us, to take an innovative approach to help identify solutions that will address the mental health crisis across the region. The challenge connects a variety of people and organisations to help solve specific problems. It will use an innovative team-based explorative and creative development process that can bring new concepts and solutions to life. The Innovation Challenge is looking for participants who are interested in innovative thinking, including people from all different professional backgrounds, including health, people who have mental health lived experience, anyone who is caring for someone with a mental health condition, students, researchers, innovators, anyone in the tech space, and any entrepreneur or someone with a beautiful mind that wants to come up with a great idea and launch it. Tonight, as I said, is the first of a series of events, and our finale will be held down in Newcastle on the 15th and 16th of March, where we'll bring everyone together for our actual challenge. And if you participate in the challenge, you do have the chance to share in the prize money of $3,500 on the day.
All right, so tonight we've got our three lovely panellists who have joined us, and we're super grateful for their time and for being here this evening, their contributions. Really looking forward to hearing from them. So now, just so I don't get anything wrong, I'm going to read to make sure I get everyone's name properly and their what they do. So first of all, we have the lovely Nell, who is the CEO and Principal Psychologist at Calm Consultants here in Tamworth. So Nell's passion lies in working with clients to achieve life goals and find meaning. Growing up in the Northwest, Nell is excited to work with the local people to enhance their well-being and build fulfilling lives. Nell brings more than 20 years of clinical experience working with adults, adolescents and groups in private practice, inpatient and community settings. Nell's therapeutic approach is practical, flexible and relevant to her clients' needs. She cares about improving health and well-being through the use of evidence-based practice and an engaging interpersonal style. She incorporates clinical training with a firm commitment to holistic treatment. Her experience in recovery, trauma, injury management and mental health assessments to support diagnosis provides the ability to work with a wide range of psychological issues. Welcome, Nell. So our second panel member is the lovely Amy, who is also one of my wonderful friends. And Amy is a school counsellor with the Department of Education, and she works in a number of schools within our local community. So Amy is a dedicated advocate for the empowerment and well-being of young people. As a professional psychologist and teacher, provisional psychologist and teacher, Amy brings a unique blend of insight and empathy to her work as a school counsellor. From her early days as a learning support officer to her teaching career in Armidale, Narrabri and Camden, Amy's journey led her to dive deeper into understanding mental health in youth. In her final year as a classroom teacher, Amy taught a school-wide wellbeing program which emphasised emotional regulation process for children with disabilities. She also launched her own business, offering wellbeing workshops and mentoring for girls and teens. Amy further honed her expertise with a Master of Psychological Practice from Charles Sturt University, specialising in school psychology. Here, Amy received the Executive Dean's Award for her honours dissertation, where she researched eating pathology, motivation and exercise in women, and analysed whether emotional intelligence could moderate associations. Fueled by dedication to creating change in her role as a school counsellor, Amy is a formidable advocate for youth empowerment and mental health advocacy. Welcome, Amy. And finally, we have the beautiful Anne Edwards, who joins us from HealthWise this evening. Anne is a mental health social worker here in Tamworth. Anne is an accredited mental health social worker with nearly 20 years of experience working in mental health. She has worked with New South Wales Health in community health in Glen Innes, and for the last 10 years has been working at HealthWise as a clinician. For the last 18 months, she has had a dual role as both a clinician and the mental health clinical team leader. Anne works across the lifespan with a particular interest in trauma and is trained in EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which she finds can be spectacularly successful. Working and living in the small rural community of Glen Innes, she has a good grasp of the challenges community members face when trying to access mental health services. So welcome, Anne. Okay, so now it's time to get underway and start the conversation with our panellists. So I will ask the first question. The panellists have just been asked to jump in if they feel called to answer that question, and we'll work our way through. So I guess it would be good just to start with, even though I've given quite a comprehensive intro, it would be lovely to hear firsthand from each of the panellists. So maybe starting with Amy and moving along, if you can just give yourself, introduce yourself and a brief kind of overview of your experiences.
Oh, thanks, Jess. It's kind of awkward when someone says all that and you're like, okay, whatever. So my first experience with mental health was actually probably in primary school. My family was quite dysfunctional, and I remember specifically the first time I used the landline telephone to call the kids' helpline. And I still to this day remember I was so overwhelmed, so worked up, and the counsellor on the other end of the phone, they worked their magic, and I was regulated by the end of the conversation. And reflecting on my work now, I think like just how important it is for our kids to access those supports. So that was my very first experience. Moving into high school, my year 8 English teacher noticed a bit of a change in me. I didn't hand in our very first essay. It was a very big deal that we handed in our first essay. And she, in the most loving and caring way, she was like, Amy, what's going on? What's going on? And I broke down. And then she led me to the school counsellor. And again, seeking that therapeutic support through that service was super valuable for me. When I was working as an SLSO at an SSP school, so for children with moderate to severe intellectual and physical disabilities, that was when I first started learning about trauma and how trauma can really impact behaviour. So I kind of moved away from my own experiences into these children's experiences and kind of what led them to be the way they are. And then from that, as Jess said, moved into teaching, and I've taught at Narrabri, so I've got a little bit of an experience of what it's like to teach a little bit further rural, and obviously teaching here and school counselling here. And I think this is such a great experience to have an open and honest discussion about mental health and wellbeing. And I don't think it would be an open and honest conversation without me saying, I'm anxious as being up here right now, and that is okay. And I feel quite overwhelmed being up here, and I feel so grateful. Thank you for asking me, Jess. And feeling like, not like I'm the expert, because I've actually got my old supervisor here in the audience, but I feel like I can offer a fresh perspective to mental health within our community. So, yeah. Thanks.
My background in mental health, I used to be a nurse many, many years ago, and in nursing I started to work in psychiatric wards, and I was appalled at how the most needy of our psychiatric patients with psychosis, high comorbidities, with kind of chronic conditions, were the ones who received the least care. I think that some people who are in that field still would agree that's still the case. And that's what attracted me to become a psychologist from being a nurse. And from that, I went on to work for Hunter Health and work in early psychosis and work in education about psychosis and in recovery for psychosis. And then we all became Hunter New England Health, so I came home to Tamworth and worked on the mental health team here before starting my own practice. But one of the big things that I've found since coming back here and having grown up in this region and earlier, further out west, where I was originally born and grew up, is that how many gaps there is in service, how we still, to this day, fight some sort of tyranny of people not being able to get up here. And by that I mean services, I mean possibly innovation, I mean money, funding, I mean professionals who are willing to relocate. And this continues to be probably one of the hardest things, is to have enough bodies on the ground, services ready to look out for the people in this community who want to stay in this community and should be able to and receive adequate care. So we don't have timely intervention, and sometimes we don't have any intervention. So that's my soapbox.
So I guess for me, I started working in mental health, moving from aged care and disabilities, and I was working with the community mental health team in Glen Innes. And I think, you know, they did a great job, but it's very much a medical model. And mental health isn't a medical model, it's a biopsychosocial model. And we need to be recognising that mental health and physical health aren't discrete. They both interrelate, and we really need to be looking at the person as a whole person, not just an illness. And so I think that's my real passion, is to understand that it's not, people aren't defined by their mental illness. And everybody here in this room would have lived experience or know someone who has lived experience. So we're the so-called experts, but you're all experts as well. And you need to recognise and acknowledge your own skills and experience, because you're all part of a community, and that means that you can all be part of a local solution. I'm short and sweet, sorry.
Well, that was good. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion, just based on the first question. So our next one is, how do you perceive the current state of mental health awareness in our community and the early intervention available to people? And how do they recognise that kind of?
Does anyone want to start? I think in general, within the general Australian community, there's gaining traction and gaining awareness. But I think given we are a regional centre, we're a little bit more isolated than those metropolitan areas, there's just a bit of a lag. And with that lag comes stigma. And so I think there's a lot more that could be done. What do you think?
I certainly think that early intervention, and that starts for wellbeing as well as for mental health, should start in schools. And to be honest, there should be somewhere for school teachers to refer people instead of just dropping that referral into what I commonly call the black hole, where there is nobody to service that. And so I think that's really difficult for our educators who are identifying and recognising, because we've got great educators. You can't throw a rock in our community without hitting a good school or a good hairdresser, oddly. But and I find they have nowhere to send anybody. They have no ready service to say, your child needs this and this needs to look at, go to here. So I think that's probably what I would say is a big problem for early intervention.
And I would actually say it starts even earlier, you know, with the postnatal period in women's lives. And, you know, we know that adverse childhood experiences affect people's both physical and mental health later on in life. So we really need to be looking at getting in that early. That said, I'm actually the mother of 14-year-old twin girls. And so I've got to listen to a lot of really not my type of music. And one of the things that I've really noticed about that music is there's a lot of songs with lyrics about mental health. And I think that's great. So it's not so great if I have to listen to it the 50th time in the car. However, it's really, you know, like music is a great medium to get a message across.
It opens up the dialogue more.
Absolutely.
And it reaches more people and it's more accessible. Yeah.
So how can individuals in the community, oh, you're right, you go, you're okay. How can individuals in the community identify a decline in mental fitness in themselves and others? So that very first stage.
I think noticing a change in behaviour in yourself and others. I think for children and adults, it's usually the same, but it presents itself differently. So for kids, a change in behaviour, so a change in their emotional responses to things. Are they overly emotional to their expression of anger or sadness or worry or fear? And also academics, is their schoolwork declining? Are they not interested in learning anymore? Is that different to what it was previously? That change is what you're looking for. There's sleep, diet, all those things, the lack of interest of things that they used to enjoy. That social withdrawal, absolutely.
So I guess it's about, change of function. We normally function like this. We normally feel pretty good about these things. We normally enjoy these things in our life, and suddenly they don't have any meaning, and I can't get up and I can't do this. And that's kind of those of us that are functioning. For somebody who struggles to function anyway because of an intellectual impairment or a physical impairment, or indeed because they have a severe psychotic illness, then those changes can be even more acute but more unrecognised. So I think when people's behaviour changes, I think more education, like Are You OK Day and mental health check-in days and things like that, are providing everybody in the community with kind of I hope, some empowerment to kind of feel strong enough to stand up and say, are you okay? I've noticed that you're not coming to soccer practice, or that you left school in tears the other day, or whatever it might be. And I think it's just giving everybody, parents, friends, family, everybody, the kind of power to be able to ask, to step up and ask people about what's going on. No judgment. What can I do? Because it's not the big things we do, it's the little things.
And it's usually friends or family who notice the changes. Often the person themselves don't. And I think that's where we've got a community responsibility as well, as you said, Nell. It's not a hard question, are you okay? But people are afraid to ask it because they're worried about the answer. So, and again, that comes back to that stigma and that fear of, what if they say they're not? What do I do then? So, and that again is around community education.
Thanks, ladies. This one's more around your personal experience, and what are some of the most significant challenges that individuals face when they are seeking mental health support within our community?
I guess I don't have any personal experience, but of course running a business, I see what other people experience coming forward. And, to be honest with you, I used to work in the public health end of mental health with people with, very, very disabling psychiatric conditions, and now I work in private health, which is a completely different spectrum. So I guess the biggest thing that I find people find coming forward is finding the right service, access to a service, or a service that will accept their referral, or knowing where to go, or knowing who to call, or and always I say to people, talk to your GP. The GP is the hub of your care. They are the person who is going to set you up on a plan or send you in the right direction. And I have GPs who phone. You know, some GPs go all the way out for their clients. So I think that access to service is probably the most difficult thing, and appropriate service.
And I think, though, one of the biggest problems, well, I certainly know in Glen Innes, is getting a doctor. Getting a doctor, finding a doctor that's affordable, because a lot of people can't afford to pay a gap, and then getting an appointment in a timely manner. You know, it's really difficult. And then again, as Nell said, having the services there, and also the GPs being aware of what's the right service for the person as well.
Yeah, in schools, getting children into paediatrician appointments is so painful. It's really, really, really challenging. And so the access to gain the supports that they need, there's a lot of hoops you need to jump through to actually gain that support. And they're all challenging. All those hoops to jump through are really challenging. And I think it comes down to access, which comes down to, I'm guessing, a lack of resources.
Absolutely. And it's sad to have to say to people in our community, if you have enough money, if you're willing to travel, or if you even have access to telehealth, then maybe you can see a psychiatrist in 6 months in Sydney. Maybe, with the right referral. And that's a maybe if you can afford it. And that's becoming harder for everybody with the cost of living, for them to access specialised health services, and particularly mental health services.
This is off script, but I'm just thinking it might be interesting for people in the audience who perhaps don't know. But could you just actually step through what that process would be, say for a child, and you're looking to get them into some kind of a service, the hoops, like actually what is the process and some kind of rough time frames, just to put some context around how, because I have heard that too, that it is like a real challenge. So maybe just to give some ideas around all those steps along the way and where there might be a gap for improvement. Maybe.
Yeah, so to get a diagnosis that's recognised within schools, you need first a paediatrician appointment. So that can take months sometimes. And then from that, you need a psychological appointment, whether that would be with an outside psych or with the school counsellor, to actually do a cognitive assessment, for example. And then from that, you need to, gather the evidence, gather everything, and even with that, there's just it takes time, and so there's some of the hoops that you need to jump through in a school setting to gain that support within a school. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the NDIS or anything, but within a school, that's what you need. But with school counselling, when it comes to more mental health like anxiety and depression, for example, we don't have the resources as school counsellors to offer ongoing counselling. Our counselling is usually we see a child, if at the most, a couple of times a term, because we are assessing so much and doing what is necessary to gain supports for children in classes that if they have an intellectual disability, for example. And so the role as a school counsellor is quite complex in general. It's not just sitting down and counselling kids. That's a very, very tiny portion of what we actually do. So to get mental health services for kids, it's accessing outside services. It's not seeing a school counsellor. So our job within a school is probably more geared towards cognitive and intellectual disabilities with the seeing a paediatrician sort of process and everything. think. So, yeah.
I don't see kids, so I'm not sure of the timeframes, but some of the other clinicians in my practice do. By the time that you get to a GP, then you get a referral to the service, and then we start talking to you about, well, generally our service tries to go, where's your child at school? Is there a school counsellor? Can they get their reporting done there? Because obviously we're a private service. Or if we're referring you on to a bigger private service in Newcastle. So we're saying to a family, pack up yourself and your kids and go to Newcastle for the day to see all of these people, a psychiatrist, a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, a psychologist, to have a full assessment done. Back in the day when I was a nurse, we used to send everybody down to Sydney to Westmead Children's. It's a bit like that. You're trying to find these big organisations that can be a one-stop shop for a family, so that they can get all the assessments their child needs and come back with appropriate reporting to guide their school. But all of that can take anywhere from 6 months to, I don't know, conservatively 18, I would say. It would depend on the referral process and how financially viable that is for the family.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So moving on now, talking about what mental health services are available and how they have evolved in our community in recent times. Assuming that there's been some improvement, but where do you see the gaps being? Like, where have we come from and where do we need to head?
Could you just...
How we fix the problems?
Yeah, like have you seen like new services coming, becoming available, programs, initiatives, any kind of things that are working well, and how could we perhaps like build on that to continue to improve, if there are? I don't know.
I think telehealth services have made a big difference. It gives more choice to people, and it's less of a waiting time than seeing someone face to face. I think one of the problems there is there's a reluctance to utilise telehealth. So I know for my service in HealthWise, we always offer people telehealth appointments, but a lot of them will say, no, well, I'd prefer to wait for a face-to-face appointment. The use of, there's some really good apps out there, particularly for people that have, low-level mental health issues, things like Smiling Mind, Mood Gym, Beyond Blue. Yeah, but again, people need to know that they're there.
I found that in schools working with teenagers, they love the online computer support. So instead of calling Kids Helpline like I did years ago, they're online seeking support through a counsellor, through their laptop, their phone. So I think those services are great. Within the Tamworth community, I love there's a time and a place for clinical work. Absolutely, you need that therapeutic support. But I also like the support of mentorship programs. So that's not necessarily that clinical stuff. You're still goal setting. You're still working on your mental health, but it's not sitting down with a counsellor and talking about your feelings. It's getting out there, going shopping, going bushwalking, working on your mental health in that regard. And I think there are services available for that, but I think there's room for that space to grow, basically. Yeah.
I think there's quite a few GPs in our area who have been really innovative in this space, using online services, connecting people with even further assessment things. The Black Dog Institute does a lot of online work, and they connect with a lot of services for clarifying diagnosis, as well as supporting people with counselling and psychiatry.
They also offer the Mental Fitness Challenge, which is for kids and teens, and which I've used with Linda quite a bit. It's been that's a great resource for kids and teens to use.
So I think that it's great that we've got some services, and I don't think that it's because we haven't got services here in this region, or that they haven't been filling a need. I think the need is growing so exponentially that we're just not keeping up with it. And I guess, I don't know if anybody's here from Headspace. They're probably in the youth space, somebody who's recognised that for a long time. You know, they just can't keep up with the need that's growing there for them. So I don't think it's through lack of trying. I think it's just, especially we've kind of got a bit of a new, I don't know, you might have more information about this. We have a new generational problem in that we're all kind of post-COVID people now. And there's even like kids who are kind of been shaped by COVID in their socialisation. The way we work is different. The way we interact with each other, the way we work as a community is different. So I just don't think that we've caught up with all of that either.
No, and we're definitely seeing the effects of COVID now ongoing in schools. You have young infants-aged children who missed out on preschool, missed out on a full year of kindergarten. And so they missed out on those really foundational early years of learning how to take turns, how to socialise, how to be with other kids. And it's only now that we're kind of seeing the effects of that. So yeah, COVID definitely has lasting and delayed ongoing effects.
Yeah, we were going to go here, but we'll go there now. Obviously, COVID, everyone's noticed COVID. No one likes mentioning the name anymore. I think everyone has post-traumatic stress from COVID. But how do we come back from an event like that when, statistically we can see mental health is just on the rise. Kids are struggling right through to the elderly. Isolation's huge. Technology, phones and gaming is huge because people were stuck at home. What can we come up with to bounce back and get some resilience and get our community back functioning? Or, is that just a dream?
I think I'm positive. I've got a positive mindset, but I think the first step for everything is a bit of education. So psychoeducation about what are you experiencing? Is it anxiety? Is it social anxiety? What are you anxious about? What's actually going on there? And with that education, that's where you can find the right trajectory that's right for you. That's a very personal, individualistic approach. As a community, I don't know.
Well, I guess, it starts with community councils. I see we have a counsellor here tonight. It starts with counsellors providing events, educations, things that will draw people literally out of their homes and back into the community, provide education, allow people spaces and places to gather and be together, and they don't all have to be about mental health education. They can be about well-being. They can just be about fun. They can be a concert, it doesn't really matter. It's about drawing people out. I think workplaces have a huge role to play in this, in supporting their staff, making them feel comfortable and confident to return to their workplace. Workplaces have got to become a post-COVID place now, somewhere that understands that everybody works a little differently, not the way that we used to. And it's just a little change, it's just a little shift in the pattern.
Well, I guess, the focus is on COVID, but let's forget drought, fires. I know late last year when the weather was so dry, I was getting a lot of referrals coming in of people that were really panicking. They were just so anxious about fires. And, that's really difficult because we live in a rural area. It's not something that we can prevent. So again, having that support available for people. I think in terms of things like COVID and getting people more connected, the social prescribing model could be really helpful in that space, where you've actually got someone like a peer navigator that is actually sitting down with someone and finding out where they need to be connected and helping connect them to the things that are going to help them feel more mentally well.
We might continue along this theme because we do have a question along these lines about how can community leaders and organisations potentially collaborate with mental health professionals or organisations to create more supportive environments for people struggling in the workplace. So if we maybe delve into that a little bit further, if there are people thinking about workplace intervention and strategies, what are some other ideas or opportunities there for innovation or change in that space?
I heard you mention earlier that a mental health check-in was something that you might have seen, and I think that should be in every workforce. Like everyone usually has a supervisor, just checking in once a week, how you going, and actually asking, are you okay, and having the knowledge of how to respond if someone is not okay. And because I think that's just incredible. I think that's, and definitely should be in every workforce, absolutely. I think Are You OK Day is fabulous, and it's amazing at how big it has grown in the past few years. But I don't think it should be limited to just that day when workforces are like, they're in a frenzy. Oh, we need to ask, we need to put the banner on, we need to put the balloons up, and it should be an ongoing thing. And that's the day we celebrate of us actually taking care of each other in our own workforce.
And keeping within that kind of workforce theme, it's about providing education about well-being and mental health. So rather than focusing on, illness and deficit of function, focusing on improving your current function, how you can do better to achieve all the things that you want to achieve in your workplace. And also remembering that we are a rural, remote community, and so you could work in a big department, but you could be the one member of that department out here, and there's a whole building full of people in Sydney, but you're out here on your own. So it's about kind of having people have connection with each other in the workplace in meaningful ways. Because I think, we've become a little city-centric, and we forget that in rural areas things go a little differently. And you said about how people wanted face-to-face. I find that all the time. I want to talk to somebody who lives here. I don't want to talk to somebody who's in Sydney. I want to speak to somebody who lives in this community. People want the solution to be in their own community. So I think that's kind of where we need to start.
And I think it's also about, it's about keeping your workforce mentally well. And one of the initiatives that I really like with Healthwise is that we have a number of groups. So we've got like a book group and a singing group and a knitting group, and they meet online, once a month. And we've got a number of other ones as well. But that really gives the employees a chance to connect with other employees that aren't in the same office necessarily, but share a similar interest, and helps build that sense of community within the workforce.
I think, sense of community is huge. If you don't feel that sense of community within your workforce, you don't care as much. You don't, there's not that connection that humans are seeking. So.
Very good. And I guess continuing on that theme of early intervention, and I think we've spoken a lot about like when you notice decline or changes in behaviour, are there opportunities to even go one step further? I think we talked about it for children, like starting right at that, from birth and the mother and father's mental health, but really prevention. So have you seen any programs, initiatives, strategies that are effective in maintaining mental health before it even becomes a change to notice, like prevention rather than early intervention, like that one step further?
I think there's something to be said, going off what you said with connecting with people who have a common interest. I think with kids, it's so important to, them to explore creativity, however they want to. So whether that's playing an instrument or getting into art or drawing or whatever. So getting creative, because that ignites the brain in so many ways. And then a healthy mind is not a healthy mind without a healthy body. And so getting active, again, the child needs to find what they love to do. There's no point forcing them into footy if they really love basketball or whatever, but getting them to do something physical to look after their body, eating well. It's looking after yourself in those simple ways that I think are the foundational things to help manage mental health before it becomes a problem, in my opinion.
I think also in schools, we should be trialling and rolling out mental wellness or mindset change courses or mentoring that amalgamate those kind of, healthy body, healthy mind things together. We teach children about like physical health, but we don't teach them about mental health. Schools talk a lot about resilience and bullying, but I'm yet to see anybody come in with a child and say, the school dealt with this really well. That's not the school's fault. I'm not blaming the school. That's about what tools they have. There are no programs that they can enact. And so I really think that, setting up mental well-being or healthy well-being courses within schools that roll out at an early age and all the way through a child's school career can help with that, so that they can recognise what a bully is, so that it's not just left to teachers either, because I think that there's enough on that load. It's about children knowing what to do if something happens, and that's not marginalising themselves by going to the teacher. And that they are able to know what resilience really is, not what the definition of the word is. And we all talk about resilience all the time, but we don't actually teach it to our kids, We don't actually say, well, that's it, resilience. What you did just then, Meg, that showed really good resilience. So I think there's a lot of kind of themes and not a lot of programs and innovation, to take your word, behind that in schools to help bring that theme forward.
I think you're right, because with the PDH curriculum and what we teach, touching on mental health is such a tiny fragment of that it's brushed over, and teachers are teaching so much within a short time frame that sliver of mental well-being that they teach, it's lost beneath everything else. So I think there's huge room for that within curriculum, and also for teachers to learn as well, and school staff. So,
And families have a responsibility as well. Many years since I went to an antenatal class, but how much do they talk about mental health in antenatal classes? And keeping well. The other thing I think too is that we're becoming more and more disconnected from nature. When was the last time you took off your shoes and walked through the grass? Even for our kids. How hard is it to get them off their devices and outside doing stuff? It's impossible, and then you don't hear the end of it. So, and one of the things that I'm constantly a little bit shocked by is the amount of parents that come in to see me because our initial appointments, because I see kids as well, the initial appointment is with the parent. And the amount of parents that have never heard of things like Family Link, where they can actually put parental controls on their kids' devices. And it's like, well, hang on, would you let them run across a highway, without a parent there? That's, they don't know what their kids are watching, they don't know what they're downloading, they don't know who they're talking to. These kids have got unlimited screen time when they should be doing other things, being kids.
exploring, being creative,
falling
being
out of
curious.
trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a segue into, we actually wanted to touch on devices and screen time and the impact that is having across all ages, from kids right through to the elderly, and whether there's any kind of ideas, or if you had an unlimited bucket of money, what would you do to throw out some solutions or ideas around this space to make change?
I think with social media and all the platforms, having a 10-second video limit, essentially, all our attention span is now limited to that short amount of time. And so gaining children's focus and attention, even they might not have social media, but they're watching YouTube videos that are, zippy, changing this, that, and even television shows are similar frames. It's a frame of this and a frame of that and a frame of that. So our attention is so restricted. And so then our focus when it comes to schoolwork or work is so limited because we're used to only having to pay attention for those 10 seconds because then the next video is around the corner. So that's the challenge that I see is that we're in such a fast-paced world at the moment. What we see, we download so much information now, whereas 20 years ago we would have a fraction of that. If we didn't know the answer to a question, you would have to go to a encyclopedia in the library to find the answer to it. Where we've got answers to everything in our phone, it's immediacy. So I think when it comes to apps and helping us, yeah, they're fantastic when you have the right app. But that's...
I don't think it's just kids. I think we all do it. If I asked you a question about something, we'd all pull out our phone. I know I would, because it's going to tell me the answer to my question. It's going to give me some steps to follow. So I don't think it's just kids that are guilty of it. I think they're watching. I have in fact sat in this cafe and watched parents have a cup of coffee on their phone while their kids just sat there. It happens all the time. We've stopped connecting with each other. I think part of that we have to learn to live with because it's what's happened in the world. But I think part of it's about offering different things like sports and things, but also little things like 5 minutes of yoga before you start a class, mindfulness session, all of those things in the workplace and in the school that become mainstream so that they just take you out and off that device for 5 minutes. And you're right, it's a big part is educating parents. I always give my if I see any parents who are having troubles with teens and they say, oh, they're not sleeping or they're cranky in the morning, I go, get up at 1 o'clock and stand in the darkened hall and watch all the blue lights under the doors because we all believe that our child isn't on the phone in the middle of the night, and they are. So we're all doing the same thing. All our children are doing it. We're doing it. It's about kind of owning that and maybe changing how we relate to that and having an alternative.
Exactly.
An alternative activity for children that becomes an everyday activity like yoga, like mindfulness, like breathing, like I'm sure a million other things that other people could think of.
And I think we shouldn't badmouth technology so much because we can use it for good. And I think there is space for using technology and apps to enhance our mental health, our mental fitness and mental well-being. Finding an app that's engaging and that people and children or whoever it's meant for will actually use, I think that's the sticking point. How do you get something that people will use and it's not going to be detrimental to their mental well-being?
Very good. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in a relatively short space of time, touched on lots of topics and potential areas that need innovation, to use that word we always use at the SRI, or to be improved or something new or fresh. So before we wrap up and enjoy some lovely dinner and further conversation, and we'll also invite some questions, but do you have any final comments that you would like to make? Anything that's kind of niggling that you think is a really big problem or an opportunity, just before we wrap up and open up for questions?
I think, as I was alluding to earlier, I think there is a space to find that app or that gadgety kind of thing that really helps us in our with our mental well-being. What that is, I have no idea. But yeah, I just think awareness and this open conversation that we're having right now is so valuable for us, for our children, for the wider community. Having places like this is awesome.
I have a few things that I've thought of, and I agree with you. I think having conversation is the biggest place to start. Everybody coming out after work tonight to talk about mental health is a huge stepping stone in improving the mental health of our community. I would love to see a number of initiatives come into our rural community. I'd love to see funding for a mental health clinician who works with children with disability and mental health issues, who can be a resource for parents and schools. I don't know whether that exists. I put my hand up if it has, and I'd love their number. I think that would be fabulous. Money for schools to run wellbeing and education programs, like in Victoria, which they do. They're currently doing a whole heap of research on the Department of Education in Victoria on what particular programs are working the best in that space. So that would be exciting to be able to adopt some of that and have somebody who could maybe bring those initiatives out here into our rural communities, because I think our schools function a little differently out here. And the other thing that I think of is that we need to attract more like-minded souls, more health professionals to come and live out here in the community and work in this community. So I think that scholarship programs would be excellent, especially they've just, speaking as a psychologist, they've just revamped again the psychology program, and it's now predominantly a 5+1. So having a scholarship for that +1 internship to be a paid placement across a variety of services out in a rural community and only offered to those people who are at a rural university like UNE and Southern Cross, I guess, would be great. So people who come from here and who want to stay here are actually being given the chance to complete their professional studies here. The same for, I think medicine already does that through Newcastle University. Don't have a lot of information about that. I think going back to helping nurses either upskill, reskill without having to give up a job and go back to university would be fantastic. We've got great nurses here in this community who want to stay here and who maybe want to change their career a bit or elongate their working life by not having to work on wards, to be able to offer them a scholarship because, you know, cost of living, everybody needs to keep working. I think in the NDIS space we need more and better trained NDIS workers who have specific training working with people with mental health and disabilities and high comorbidities. And I think if we can offer good scholarships or funding for people to come and work here and gain those qualifications and stay in our community, I think that can only help us in this space.
So I guess I'm going to come across it a little differently, but I agree with both of what you say. I think one of the issues in mental health is the actual model of care that we use, which is primarily a session-limited, time-limited model. Yeah. So, you know, if people only need 4 sessions, that's fantastic. But if they need more than 10, too bad, so sad, unless you want to pay privately. I think also we need to be looking at a more integrated care team. So, you know, yes, the doctor has to be part of that team, but, you know, we need to be looking at incorporating more lived experience workers. We need to be looking at incorporating peer navigators and people that can help with the lower level kind of needs as well. Because at the end of the day, if people don't have a house, if they don't have nutritious food, if they're not getting a good education, if they're discriminated against, you know, they've lost before they've even started. So we need to address those needs as well. The other thing too, I think, is that we really need local solutions to local problems. You know, it's all well and good to have a federal government give a blanket kind of option, but that doesn't work. You know, we need that flexibility, and we need that flexibility in funding as well. You know, if there's a flood in Narrabri, we need to be able to put the resources in there, you know. If there's a bushfire, if there's COVID. So it's really also understanding that the local people understand the local needs, and it's not just the professionals, it's everybody as a community. And then, you know, it'd be great to see some way that could come together so that as a community we are looking for solutions and not just looking to GPs or professionals, but understanding that we're part of the solution as well.
Thank you so much. We just want to thank our wonderful panellists for their time tonight.